Next we have Krueger, who is going to talk about the emerging neuroscience of third-party punishment. Professor Frank is an associate professor and chief, social cognition and interaction functional imaging laboratory, co-director, Center for the Study of Neuroeconomics, Krasnov Institute for Advanced Study, George Mason University, USA. Additionally, he is an adjunct faculty to National Institute of Advanced Studies. Frank.
Yeah, thank you for the nice introduction. So I would like to talk today about my field, social cognition, and I want to pick one special part out of it, the neuroscience of third-party punishment, of social norm violations. To put it in a better context, first I want to tell you what the mission of my lab is. So I call it a sci-fi lab, and I want to focus on social cognition and interaction and using functional imaging methods. So when we talk about social cognition, we're thinking about what do I mean when I recall information about another person, I read the mentalizing about the other person, and also I trust another person. So these are the topics I'm interested in. How is empathy encoded in the brain? Why do we develop a theory of mind compared to other species? What are our belief systems about free will, etc., how they code it in the brain? And that's related how other people trust, how moral our brain is, how moral we are. And today I want to focus on the third-party punishment. So this is the mission. We want to try to surely measure behavior, see what kind of cognitive processes are involved, and then our main focus is on imaging. So we're using functional imaging, we're using FNIRS, and also we have a value data set, we're using lesion data. So we have access to Vietnam head injury studies, patients which went to to the Vietnam War, and they got a penetrating head injury, and they have specific lesion, and we can use this approach to verify some fMRI results. And then sometimes we're also using on the hormone neurotransmitter level, and I will show you later a study about oxytocin, how this promotes social cognition, and then if it's possible also genetics underfound. So the whole idea is, so how are those components work together, how the neuroplasticity works, and what is the neural underpinnings about how nature influences, what is environment, and now also on, and I hope with this visit and with this conference we also can push a little bit in the direction of culture differences. So this is the outline of the talk, the next 30 minutes. So first I want to just define what do we mean by third-party punishment. I want to give you some psychological components. And then I want to show you a bunch of experiments we did or others to give you background information about this, and then coming to a higher level again, giving a conclusion and then an outlook. So first the background. So why I'm interested in, and this is more like very high level now, but we have a social dilemma. And we talked about it already, right? Based on the social brain hypothesis, we are very social creatures. We have developed specific parts, especially as also mentioned in creativity, the prefrontal cortex is well developed if you compare to other species. And those areas are not just have more neurons, we have more hardware, but also those areas are much more better connected to other brain areas. And that gives us huge advantage. We can plan ahead, we can be very social, we can be very cooperative. But on the other hand, that also creates a problem. We're very clever, but we can also deceive each other, right? And there's always a trade-off between me and the society, and I have to find the right balance. And society sometimes have to give me some boundaries, because if we're all free riders, then cooperation society wouldn't work. So I'm interested in how that works together, and how can that measure be in the brain. So what the problem is, remember like 30,000 years ago, we had these kind of social networks. We had only groups where we're living together with 150, 500, 1,500 people. But nowadays, right, this is New York City, millions of people there, all have to follow some rules, that we have some kind of social life, some interactions. And that's I'm interested in. And one way to ensure that we behave cooperatively is third-party punishment. So what are the definitions? This is a cartoon I'm just using now over and over to demonstrate what I'm talking about. So first of all, this is a third party. This is, let's say, an example. There's a social norm violation going on. There's an offender, and he's harming another person. So we have here the offender, we have the victim, he's harming the other one, and this is a third party observing this social violation. And now he wants to enforce the norm, don't harm anybody, right? So each of us has social norms. We develop them over our life. In the beginning, right, we have universal norms. You shall not kill, you shall not harm other people, right? This is the golden rule. Behave as you want to be treated by others. But also specifically for social economics interaction, we have rules like to be fair, don't steal from others, and don't cheat. Those rules are encoded now, and what happens is actually we're pretty good on this, picking this up. And also what I want to argue now the next 20 minutes, we have a pretty much good urge to punish norm violation because this is hardwired in our social brains. That's why we are social beings. And when I talk about second-party punishment, the slogan would be, you harm me, I punish you, right? This is third party, the victim would get on the offender. But now this is a trick for our society that we develop third-party punishment. I punish you because you harm somebody of my group, in our social group. So what we're taking out here is the harm factor, right? I'm not personally affected. I'm impartially involved. I can think about this, and I can make the right conclusion. Did he broke the social rule? Does he have to punish? It looks for you funny right now, but 30,000 years ago, that was very important that we cooperate to survive, right? And even if we punish somebody and banish them out of group, that also was a big loss for us because there's one person left helping us hunting, etc. So try to imagine yourself like 30,000 years ago. Nowadays, we also punish in social interaction, but this is the driving force. And what I want to stress also, we still have those brains for 30,000 years ago. We are hardwired like those. And if we see social norm violation, you also want to engage those brain areas and you punish. So this is the only mechanism. They argue there's models that third-party punishment can explain why we are cooperative on a high level, on a very society level. People are not genetically connected to each other. There are other mechanisms like kin selection, right? I can maybe behave cooperatively because I want to help my kin, right? But normally we are all genetically not related in a kin sense, so that cannot explain the mechanism, right? Another mechanism would be a reciprocal altruism. So I help you today, you help me tomorrow. But our groups are so big, we don't even keep track out when you help me. That might not help. The other one is that I built like a repetitive reciprocity, so I just behave cooperative today and you see it and later maybe help me. Also, most of our life, we behave socially with other people we never see again in our whole life, right? So what they argue is this strong reciprocity is the factor that we can keep up those kind of cooperation. And this is also the basis of our modern system of the criminal justice, right? So we have justice, we have a court, etc., which means if there's a criminal offense, that people will get punished. So this, as I said, the third party is pretty unique for humans. They did this kind of experiments. They tried to simulate the chimpanzees and others because they have smaller groups. They never have to develop these kind of art. So we are the only ones which are doing this kind of third-party punishment. And what comes into this place also, kids are already pretty good. Starting with 4 years, they're switching, and they can also do third-party punishment. And that has to do something that we develop theory of mind. So it's not just me. I can take a perspective of another person. That's why I can do this kind of theory of mind. And it doesn't matter, it's all over the place in the earth, right? If it's in my hometown in Germany, if it's on my university in the US, or it's here. If norms are validated, broken, people want to punish them. And I'm interested in where does it happen in the brain. So why is it important? So I talked already that's important for criminal law, and I also work with judges together to get them sense about it. It's also important about philosophy, right? If we have free will, should I punish somebody? If he doesn't have free will, there's no punishment, right? Because everything was predetermined. Social psychology is important. Do we punish differently in group, out group? We know that. What are the factors? And also, this is interesting, psychiatry, right? There are some diseases, they don't even can take the mental stance of the other person, like autism, so that's why they cannot punish. Or other groups, they don't even see the norm violation. Borderline patients, etc., they don't see the norm. Psychopaths, they don't learn the norms. They don't see there's a norm violation, and that's why they don't get punished, and they also get in trouble because they will get punished because they broke the law. Right? And my focus is here, and this I want to do the next 20 minutes. So what are the underlying underpinnings of this? So to study this, right, this is very abstract. So now we have to bring it down on a concrete level. We need an experiment. One is we can use these kind of ratings where we give them criminal offenses. Maybe take a minute and read them. This is a very extreme one, and this is a typical example we would use in the US. There's always an offender, John, he's doing something, and this is pretty tough here, what he's doing. And this is the situation, right? There is a norm violation that somebody harms somebody. That's a third party. There's an offender. In this case, it's John. There's always a victim. And now what happens is, this is the psychology behind it. Basically, we're punishing based how much we blame. And we blame based on two factors. Was there a guilty act? Is somebody harmed, in this case? And did he do it intentionally? Was there a guilty mind? So in our case, humans, we pay attention of intention. If people did it by accident, we don't punish that much as if they would do it by attempted harm, for example. And those are now our factors, basically. We punish, we have the guilt, this is the harm to the victim, we have our intention, this is related to the offender, and that has to be combined, that we blame. And we blame very often in our life, right? We don't punish, we just blame. Oh, why is he doing this, blah, blah, we're complaining, right? But then you have to do an extra step, you have to punish the person, right? You have to choose the right punishment to fit the crime. In older times, right, there was like tit for tat. If you kill somebody, I can take maybe somebody from your group and I can kill them. I mean, those times are over, but this kind of stuff, yeah? I mean, so now, we are not the first one, but basically there's a lot of studies now, and this is a model I want to promote to you, that these components have concrete underlying neural networks. And this is based, the first one now, there's our salience network. So these are the areas, and you have heard them also in other contexts during the conference, right? So this is coding harm, the salience network, and typical areas are the amygdala, the insula, and also the ACC. So first, I have to see that there was a guilty act. There has to be a norm violation. I have to be sensitive for it, that somebody got hurt. The other factor is intention. And this is what they call the default network or the sea of mind network, where I have to see what was the intention of the offender, right? What was the goal and what was the outcome. And this has to be combined. And here comes into the play that the key rule of our prefrontal cortex. So we are able to live in the future, in the past, and in the present. We can think ahead, we can travel back. Other animals cannot do this. So what we do is we can combine information, this is especially the medial prefrontal cortex, and this upper part is, it's combining what was the goal of the offender. The other one, the ventral medial, is more connected to the limbic areas, and there it codes what was the outcome. So I basically internally see, why did he do it, what's the goal, did he get harmed? I put this together, I blame the person, and then the next network kicks in, and this is the punishment network. And this is basically, we heard it also in a creativity talk, is the executive network, and these are the areas, lateral prefrontal cortex, but also parietal areas for attention. So this network, I want to prove you now that it comes over and over in studies, and I want to give you two examples, or actually three. And this is a study we finished recently and got published. So basically, and I want to now involve you also a little bit, that you do these kind of tasks. So we use these kind of different harm scenarios, right? It could be easy ones, low harm, theft by taking, but it gets pretty much expensive. Robbery, kidnapping, rape, murder, and torture. And the question is now, these are the scenarios, the intent was obviously purposely, John did it on purpose, but what we changed is was the harm. So there was like scenarios, there was low harm to the victim, there was high harm to the victim. And then this is an example for like on a low harm, I think when you would ask here, how much would you, John, punish for this, you would put it here. Punishing is 0 to 100, right? But later we ask them, what does 0 mean for you? What means 100, right? Maybe a girl, you have to pay money, you have to go to sentence, three days in prison, etc. And also in the US, the extreme would be death penalty. Right? So we would ask that afterwards. And this correlates pretty much good between how much you punish and what kind of punishment you will give. And that would be on the other extreme. People get very upset of that, very emotional. They would punish John for this. And on the top of that, we wanted to argue, right? We have all these beliefs in free will. We think we are doing what we're doing. And it's important that we're talking about belief in free will, right? I have a belief that what I'm doing is I'm the owner of my actions, right? It doesn't mean free will exists, but what has been shown over and over, that if I change the belief in free will, I change pro-social behavior. People, I can prime them to be more deterministic and they behave more amorally, right? So we are interested in how do people punish differently if they believe in free will and not in free will, in determinism. And then also we separated this in low and high harm effect. And then we have a 2x2 design. We want to see what is going on in the brain. Do believers in free will code the information differently? And we had some control measures. So what we're using is an fMRI. And just one slide, it's a byproduct, right? This is our neuroactivity. We don't measure that. We have a byproduct, which is the blood oxygen level dependent signal. It's a hemodynamic response. If you're using your brain, the brain is using up glucose, oxygen. That changed the proportion of oxygenated, deoxygenated hemoglobin. That changed the parametric properties of that area in the brain, and I can pick that up with my fMRI machine. And remember, milliseconds neuroactivity, and if you measure the bolt, and this is the disadvantage of this one, it takes 6 seconds to peak. So it's a very slow signal, but it's pretty much nicely correlates to the neuroactivity. So what did we found on the behavior level for the study? And remember, we had the 2x2 design. Low effect crimes, high effect crimes, determinately ballistic. And this is what you would expect here, right? People who believe more in free will would punish more because they think John is responsible for their own acts, right? Interesting, the determinists, they still punish, but there was a difference. And when you measure this and analyze it now in a brain area, what comes out is the right TPJ, the temporal-parietal junction. That's the typical area to infer the intention of another person. So if you believe in free will, you activate those areas much more and put more thinking about what John is doing. And then this area that's why more activated. But now comes the punchline. It doesn't matter if you believe in free will or not. If I show you a norm violation which is very harmful, and it includes harm, murder, etc., it doesn't matter what you believe, you punish the same. So this is, again, the message is we are primed to punish norm violation. We get emotion involved. Cognition, forget it. This was unfair. He should get punished. And those differences disappear now, right? And what we see is that we see in both groups that there's high activation of the anterior. This is the area of norm indication. As I said, this is the harm indicator. Yeah. So that shows you that you can use this kind of paradigm and also tweak it and ask questions about beliefs in free will, etc. Then we replicate this kind of data set. What I said is we have access, and what we did is a lesion study. So remember, we have these Vietnam veterans. They went to war, and they got shrapnel in their head. They got shot, they survived, but still the shrapnel is still in their brain. They have focal brain lesion differently, small enough to survive. If it would be a big one, they wouldn't survive, right? So you cannot do fMRI, you have to do a CT scan, and we have roughly 114 of those, and then we have 32 controls. Those are also soldiers who went war, and luckily they didn't get a penetrating head injury. And what we can do now, it's a nice method, and this is a nice data set. We can overlay all the lesion of the patients, and we get this lesion map here. And basically we cover the whole brain. And now we can also run a kind of statistic analysis. So what area are associated with my third-party punishment? And we see here that in this case, they have to do a rank ordering of these kind of scenarios, that same areas popping up as in an fMRI experiment. It's not so important what areas, but it's a nice proof. Remember, if you do fMRI, it's a correlate, and it's also depending on what kind of control condition. The brain is always active, so I have to do a contrast, experimental condition, control condition. Depending on that one, I get different brain areas. But if you have a brain lesion somewhere and cannot perform the task, you can make causal relationship about third-party punishment, etc. Another example, so remember, there's a difference between blaming, what we argue, and punishment. So can we disentangle both? So what we did is an oxytocin study, same paradigm, right? They read the scenarios, and this time they had to punish either or have to say how much harm was inflicted to the victim, right? 2 scales this time. And again, 2x2 design, so we had to punish harm, or how much harm was, it changed a bit now. So this is one scale punishment, the other one is how much harm was inflicted on the victim. And then we had 2 groups, oxytocin group and the placebo group. And then control measures. So what is oxytocin? You have heard about it. It's a hormone, it's also a neurotransmitter. It's in the media, at least in the US. It's peaked and it's already gone. And you can buy it also if you want. Basically, it's a natural hormone, and it's mostly known for women, for lactose, etc. But it plays a role in our whole life, not just only in women, also in men. It is called the birth hormone, the cuddle hormone, the bonding hormone, the love hormone. So it keeps us connected. With other people, if you touch another person, oxytocin gets released, or you see the baby face of your baby, it gets oxytocin. That helps us to bind to another person. And what happens is, like, it gets produced in the hypothalamus, and then it gets released as a hormone, but also it gets released through axons to different parts of the brain, which are connected with oxytocin receptor genes, and those are the areas, the emotional, affective areas. Right? And we have intrinsically oxytocin, but what you can do now is I give you a little dose more. And this is like the intranasal oxytocin study we're doing. And there's a model, and there's studies out there. You can Google them, 300 more studies about how oxytocin influences our pro-social behavior and interaction. Basically, we give it externally, and there's different factors. It's not just on and off, right? But it influences at the end social cognition and prosociality. Trust behavior, fairness, and here would be like mentalizing. And it's dependent on the context, right? It's not on and off, right? If you have a different context, in-group, out-group, you punish maybe more the out-group than the in-group with oxytocin. It's depending on your individual differences, right? How you have different internal oxytocin. If you have a disease, for example, autism don't have a good much oxytocin receptors, those factors play in. But the mechanism is like three that propose, right? Oxytocin changed the salience of stimuli. I get more aware of them. It reduced my anxiety. I'm more willing to approach in a social interaction. And I also got bonded with the other person. And that might change social cognition and personality, prosociality. So we did this now. There's two groups. They don't know which one they got. And this is our 2-2 design, punishment and harm. And we were surprised. But what happened is oxytocin doesn't change punishment. It changed your empathy for the victim. You see it's more, you feel more empathic now with the person. And that makes sense because they make difference between cognitive empathy and affective. So oxytocin is triggering more the affective part. And that was surprising. So basically it shows also it can be distinguished between punishing because they punish the same, but now they feel more empathic to the victim. So this is one paradigm. I talked to you now, we're using other paradigms. And this is like the economic game paradigms, and I like those because you can set up social interaction. And one of the game is the dictator game, and I would like that you play it with your partner to understand it. I give you $12, 12 euros, whatever it is, 12 monetary units, and your goal is split it and give it to the other person, and the other person has to accept it. Please do it, roughly. How much would you give to the other person? And the other person has to accept it. Internally, how much you would say? Half, it's too much. People give like 8/4. That was a good one. Then you are right. If you give everything, you're too pro-social. That's not good also, right? But nobody gets zero, right? We all get money. Why, right? And I want to know why that happened in the brain. So you can set up the brain now, the games differently because we want to build the third-party punishment paradigm. So now a different game. I have $12. I can split them. But now the other person can accept. Do I accept the split, yes or no? So let's say I do a 10-2 split. I keep 10, I give you 2. Would you accept it? Yes? Okay, then I get the 10, you get the 2. If you say no, no deal. No money gets exchanged. And this is the kind of second-party punishment, right? Because I can punish you because you broke the fairness rule. If you got money from the experimenter, you should give me at least $2 or $3, right? So this is the second-party punishment. And now we want to do the third-party punishment. Basically, another person is observing this kind of social interaction, and now I have my own resources, and I can punish the proposer. Same thing. He has 12, he splits 10-2, and now I think it's unfair. I'm using my own money and punish the proposer, and I give up some of the money and get deducted from that person. And this we can measure a kind of third-party punishment with a kind of economic game paradigm. And this, again, it's done over, we did recently a meta-analysis. It's like 20 studies where you ask what areas on average are lighting up with this kind of paradigm. And these are the same as I proposed before. This is the model, but now it's a different norm, right? We have punishment, third party on the economic game, but this time we don't measure harm norm, we measure fairness norm, right? Because how fair is it, the split? And again, intention, fairness, same network. I want to give you also an example how we measure it and how you see the areas. Let's say we did an experiment which I explained before, third party, norm violations, he gives a split, fair unsplit, he can punish. He can use money to punish the person. And now we want to see actually what happens if other people are also there and can punish. So what do you think? And that's what they call is diffusion of responsibility. You punish another person, third party, and now there are 2 or 3 other people there, and they have the same rules. They can also punish the other person. What happens? Are you punishing more or less? Less. Right? What's going on in your mind? What would you say? Basically, what people would say is, it's not me alone again, right? The other people there should also chip in, right? And that's why I reduce my punishment. Other people punish, and that together punish the person. And we are interested in how this now changing the brain network, right? So what we see is now behaviorally it works. So we're focusing on, remember, it's a 2x2 design. I'm punishing alone in a group, and we're only focusing on the unfair here, right? So I punish more or less. Punishment gets reduced when I punish alone versus when I punish in a group. And also I feel less responsible. That was our argument, that people have a diffusion of responsibility. They don't think other people should also chip in as a norm. We all together punish that person. And that's why responsibility rating went down. And then we run a kind of mediation analysis, and we could show that actually that punishing my responsibility rating are actually causally driving my punishment. So this is an argument on the behavior level. And now we did it on the fMRI level, and remember again, you don't know this area, but these are the same I showed you before in the model. And when you do now the interaction effect, so I'm asking now what happens in the brain when I switch from a lone condition to the group condition, what areas are now sensitive? And again, we found key areas which I proposed before. And the most important area is the left-right anterior insula. This is the indicator. If I could pick you out, and I don't even see the game, I measure you in a scanner, I see how high your insula is activated, I can tell you how much you will punish and if you will punish. This is the first indicator. It's like an arousal, emotional one, like you can call it anger, whatever it is. You get upset about the situation. And the more unfair somebody gets treated, the more upset you get, right? And these mostly is left-right, but they showed that the right insula is the most one, it's involved. But now also there's other areas. Remember, from alone to the group, you have to change your thinking, the goal. I'm not punishing alone now, I punish with other people. And that is now mediated by brain areas in the prefrontal cortex. And again, our dorsal medial prefrontal cortex and our ventral medial, and then also the precuneus. And now you can ask, actually, that's a nice way, not just have brain areas, so how they talk to each other. What you can do is a kind of connective analysis. You're asking what areas are talking to the other one, influencing, so you can see a causal relationship. And what you can run is a kind of effective connectivity analysis. And remember, we did this for the 5 regions we found. And this is now when I punish alone. And this is the brain on the top. These are my brain areas I found. And you see that the insula is the driving force of that network. If you punish alone, the idea is you get upset, you want to punish it. I tell all the other brain regions, unfair, calculate, blame, blah, 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 punish. Yeah? This is because this is the driver. And now it changed. If I in the group condition, I'm changing the context. The prefrontal cortex adjusting to the situation, and now the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex is the driver. Changing the goal. I'm not alone anymore. Anybody else should chip in. Don't get upset. Insula. Don't punish too much. So that's why the dorsal medial prefrontal cortex is bringing other areas down. Yeah? This is a nice way to see how not just brain area lighting up in networks, but also how they communicate to each other. So this would be the summary of this study. We show that diffusion of responsibility is changing based on the situation, and behaviorally we say punishment is changing, and on the brain activation we have 3 areas from the network I was proposing: insula for salience, dorsal medial prefrontal for goal, and I showed you there's a top-down, bottom-up proposed. I can measure this effective connectivity. So the home take message is, there's an underlying network. It doesn't matter what kind of social norm you measure. First, I blame. I blame somebody because he did it on intention and how much he got harmed. It's interesting, kids until 4 years, they still punish on harm. And then theory of mind kicks in, and they reading the intention of the person, they see that the person did it intentionally, then it changed. Also, if I would zap out your temporal parietal junction, which is reading the intention one, you would also punish now under harm. So this is, you can see that you can also change the network, right? And you can actually rule it back when you were a child. So remember, there's one key area measuring the outcome, the guilt act. This is our salience network. There's another one bringing the pieces together about the intentions. Then you combine both, you blame, and based on the blame, you're choosing the right appropriate punishment. And this is a punishment network. So a couple more minutes. So what we want to do now in the future, remember, it's science, never perfect, right? We showed you now the whole model and two norms. One was harm norm, right? Don't harm another person. John was harming the person, right? Killing, shooting, beating. And the other one was a fairness norm, right? It was an economic game. It's about money. I saw a fairness norm violation because John, for example, didn't split right the money. He kept all the money, right? So now you can ask, does it all hold for other norm violation? I think so, but that has to be proven. Remember, we also only choose intent purposely. John did it always on purpose, right? You can frame the scenario differently, that he did it accidentally, attemptedly, so you can change the intention. That would change the network. And also maybe there has to be a better paradigm. Right now we're using these kind of offenses against. But this is now what we want to do now in our research line is, right? What are the different norms? What is the offender actually, right now we only scan that person, right? What is the offender actually doing in the brain when he gets punished? It's interesting. What is different between second and third party punishment, right? Remember, I was arguing second party punishment, you're much more engaged. I go out there, you push me in, I get emotionally aroused. I'm going to say, what's going on, right? I'm very emotional, right? I'm maybe more willing to punish, right? I don't even think about it. Was it intentionally from you, etc.? Third party, you're impartially, you're not involved. You can much more using your higher order cognitive resources to make a judgment. And then it's interesting, the whole idea about what we call first party punishment, second party punishment, third party punishment. And this is the punchline, basically, how nature tricks us that we behave corporately. First of all, it's first party punishment. I have the social norm in my head. I feel guilty, for example, if I break the law. That's the first protection, that I might behave cooperatively. The second one is, if I hurt you, I have to assume that you also punish me back. Maybe if I hurt you personally, second party, and then I also know government, society kicks in and punishes me on a society level, puts me in prison, takes me out of the society. So basically our society works well because we have these three different brain mechanisms in there, and they're all in the same areas, but they are from different angles, right? I feel guilty because my insula lights up because I broke the norm. Here I observe that he broke the law, my insula goes up because I feel with him because he was hurt or he did, yeah? So it's basically, and we are interested in how all this gets pieced together. Just some acknowledgements. This is our lab over there. And then it's very important to have these kind of collaborations. This is Kevin McCabe. It's an economist. So he developed, for example, the trust game. So I'm working with him about how we can make better economic paradigms. This is the judge I'm working in. So he's a trial judge in the US. And actually he puts people on death penalty, etc. And he's interested also in the brain. It's very rare that you have a judge who's interested in only what happened in the brain. And check out, he has a very good book, The Punisher's Brain, where he explains how sometimes these kind of processes goes on when he is doing the third-party punishment. This is my mentor, Jordan Grassman. I'm working together with the warfighter head injury study with lesion. This is Mary Lee. In the US, you need somebody who has the access to the oxytocin studies, right? It's kind of drugs. You have to have collaborators. And then I'm also working together with philosophers. So this is Henrik Walter. He's a psychiatrist and also a philosopher interested in how beliefs and free will are changing our punishment. That's pretty much everything. Thank you very much.